The stuff going on in the podcast game at the moment is absolutely wild. There's literally so much people are missing out on. And this, I think, is one of the main ones. People still think that it's audio first. And in fact, it's actually video first for discovery, audio for trust and actual bond building. You see, we recently uploaded our high quality video episodes to Spotify again after being notified by Spotify that we're missing an opportunity. Something we had stopped doing for a while, to be honest. We used to upload them, we did really well, but we stopped over time. You don't measure the data, right? If what you don't measure doesn't grow. And we instantly saw a spike in watch time and engagement. And we knew we'd missed this opportunity. So of course we've gone back and uploaded back to, I think, episode 50 where we had stopped. But interestingly, the spike was across the board, not just video. So what I mean by that is that the video list of watches obviously went up, but audio went up as well. So that tells us quite a lot of information. Most people still listen. In fact, personally, I only listen to podcasts. I don't watch any podcasts on the TV or on YouTube or on Spotify. I listen when I'm on walks, in the gym, on planes, even sometimes when I'm working, if I'm doing something that's creative and I don't need to be worried about what I'm listening being then written down on whatever I'm writing. So, should you bother with video, whether you've got a podcast or not? I'm going to cover this because obviously we want to talk to people who might just want to go onto podcasts and be interested, or maybe you have a podcast and you're wondering, should you invest more in video? So let's break down the stats and the strategy. So in 2024, 80% of podcast consumption was still audio first, and that has really moved into 2025. But Spotify recently reported that video podcasts are getting 3 times the engagement, and that is across the board, like I've seen in our own stats. That is, they see your podcast, they see it's got a video on Spotify, they watch a bit of the video, then they go and watch the audio only. YouTube, as we know, is the #1 platform for podcast discovery. That's the key word there, the discovery. So even, and this is most likely, if people go elsewhere to listen, this is exactly how I find podcasts. I'll find a clip on YouTube or Instagram, but YouTube primarily, maybe in shorts, maybe just a clip, and then I'll go and find it on Apple or on Spotify probably. So what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that audio still dominates for consumption. And for the same reasons that podcasts were invented, we can't all watch video all the time. It's basically an alternative to the radio, isn't it? Or to music, a podcast. You should be able to go and do anything. But video is quickly becoming king for discovery. So you need both. And if you're going on podcasts as a guest, you want both. But if you've got a podcast yourself, then of course, it's probably time you start thinking about improving the video quality, which is difficult, right? That's difficult. It's why we came away from online podcasts, because even with professional cameras and lighting, you can't quite get that quality that you might want. Maybe we're missing a trick. Some of the big podcasters, like Modern Wisdom, for example, do still do it, but it's not the same, especially when you're listening audio only. It's not the same. I won't listen to an audio podcast when I know it was recorded online, because I know there's going to be lag and it's not quite what I want. But discoverability is also impacted. So let's be real, because we're using podcasting here as a business growth tool. And so, yes, I'm still an audio listener, and I know that loads of my audience are too. You know, we're okay on YouTube. We do well on the Spotify video channel. Instagram gets good reach, but I know that they go straight into the audio platforms once they see that a new video or new podcast, has come up. But I also know people scroll through Instagram, they see clips, they click through, they end up watching on Spotify or YouTube. Maybe they then go later and save it and listen on Spotify or wherever. That's the nuance. That's the thing we have to be aware of. So if your audience are commuters or gym rats, you've got to lean into the audio. If they binge content and you can know that you've got a YouTube channel or something and you can get them to watch the whole thing, invest even more in video. Think about what makes video different. And you don't need to go all in on everything, but you do need to know where your audience lives and how they are consuming. Because this is where things get even more interesting. If you're hosting a show, you control the quality. You can film with intent. You can design clips for discovery and SEO. And if you're guesting, you still do have some control. You don't get to choose the setup. You might show up on a video first podcast, for example, with 3 cameras, lighting, the works, or it might just be a guy in the car with his AirPods and an iPhone. And I've been both of those guys. Give them a chance. They might have a good following. But that's why we always need to prep our clients differently for video first interviews, because you've got posture, lighting, tone, eye contact. You're not just being heard, you're being watched. And if you're building trust, that makes a huge, huge difference. It's one of the reasons that in our own podcast, we'll have an over-the-shoulder shot. So in most podcasts, you might see the guest like this, sort of a 45-degree angle, or maybe even this sort of angle. I just think it's terrible. We have an angle where you're sort of like this. You should be able to see into their eyes. Even if I'm looking at the guest or the host here, you should be able to look as if you're looking at me, because that builds so much more trust than just looking at a person side on. And so when we've added our videos to Spotify this month, there was no crazy announcement, there was no push, but we instantly saw a boost in episode completions, DM replies, follow-throughs to our newsletter. And so it turns out some people just like seeing the conversation unfold. They like to be able to take their phone from their pocket and just see what they look like. Quite often when I'm listening to a podcast, if I don't know the guest, you want to Google and just see what this person looks like. Do they look how they sound? Does that accent match the face that you thought they might have? You might want to see a bit of eye contact. You might want to understand body language. You might want to see the reactions. Maybe you're listening to something and you think someone's being rude and you look at it and they're actually happy and smiling. And it's a completely different conversation than you thought you were listening to. That's where trust compounds. It's all these touch points that we need to build that familiarity and build that amount of interactions that someone needs to trust you and ultimately, potentially, become a client of yours, or at least tell someone that you should become a client of theirs. It's that affiliation compounds. And so here's the takeaway for you. Audio builds loyalty. Video builds reach and discoverability. And if you're showing up as a guest, ask if it's a video show. Ask how many cameras they've got. Ask about the lighting. Prep like it's always a video first podcast. You never know who's watching. You never know who might see that clip. That clip might last forever. And we know that people are listening, so the audio quality should always be amazing, but we want to make sure that if they're watching, we are the ones that are showing up for them. We resonate with them. Because your next client might not be reading your content, but they might be watching or listening to someone else's.